Okay, thank you. Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference on live streaming video on the town's live stream page at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary-Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca, and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, that's 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted on the screen below the live stream page at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call. When you call in, staff will ask for your name and item number you wish to address and your telephone number. Then further instructions will be provided for you to call back to join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, please press *6 to unmute yourself. The applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of their application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for each presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for each presentation. All remarks and questions will be directed to the chair, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to comments made by interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns found in staff report, particularly with any proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. Finally, the matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of all discussion. Any person desiring a notice of decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary-Treasurer. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consent applications to the applicant and agent and any other person who has filed a written request for such notice. The last day to appeal to the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. Only the applicant, specified persons, or public bodies may appeal the committee's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In November of 2022, Bill 23 legislation, the More Homes Built Faster Act, amended the Planning Act to remove appeal rights for members of the public. If no appeal is received within the prescribed timeframe, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding. The Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in this hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and any other person participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. At this time, we have no regrets. Do I have any declarations of security interests? I see none. Thank you. I'll take any requests for deferral. Anyone in the audience who is seeking to defer an application, please raise your hand and the Secretary-Treasurer will invite you to speak.
Madam Chair, I'm just moving Sandra Gava in.
Hi, good evening, Madam Chair and committee members.
Hi.
My name is Sandra Gava. I'm representing the file at 190 Don Essel Drive, A008-2025. And we'd like to request a deferral to work with town staff to make some revisions that address their comments.
Perfect, thank you. Members, all those in support of a deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred, and you'll see the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready, and she'll fit you in the next available meeting.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Anyone else, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have two more. I'm just moving Curtis Van Keulen in.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Curtis Van Keulen.
Good evening, Mr. Van Keulen.
I'm representing 2019 Lakeshore Road East, file number A016-2025. We'd like to request a deferral to work with planning staff to revise our design to meet their comments.
Very well, thank you very much. Members, all those in support of a deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred, and you'll see the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, Allison Weir is being moved in.
Very well, thank you. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, good evening, Ms. Weir. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm the owner of 2358 Rebecca Street. So we only received the planner's response on Friday. They had some objections. We sent revised drawings reducing the RFA on Monday, but haven't heard back. If you're willing to discuss tonight, we can, but if not willing to proceed with the new drawings, then I'm gonna defer.
Yeah, I think you should defer because we don't have access to these new drawings that have come in later than the deadline that is expected for the circulation to go through.
Okay, thank you.
So, members, all those in support of a deferral? Okay, your application has been deferred, and you'll see the Secretary Treasurer when you're ready. Okay. That was the last of them, right, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, very well. The first item on our agenda is a consent application, B2412 at 127 Chisholm Street. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Demchuk.
Good evening, members of the committee. I have prepared a brief presentation for this night's consent. Thank you very much. So my name is Paul Demchuk with the Tory Planning and Management. I'm here to discuss specifically a consent application being a lot line adjustment for 127 Chisholm Street and 15 John Street. Next slide, please. So just briefly to set the context, you can see 127 Chisholm Street is noted in red, and this is a bird's eye or axonometric view of the area around the subject site. Obviously, you can see the intersection towards the center of the screen at Chisholm and John, and then just further in the background, obviously it's a location within Kerr Village, within the town of Oakville. It's obviously a designated strategic growth area noted by the province. And obviously there's a range of built forms that exist within the immediate context, both semi-detached dwellings, single detached dwellings, townhomes. And then obviously you can see in context a number of apartment buildings that range in heights anywhere from 6, 10, and then up towards 17 stories at its greatest height. Just across the street from the subject property, specifically on John Street. Next slide, please. So just briefly, in terms of the planning context, the subject site, as I mentioned, it's within a growth area within the town, specifically being Kerr Village, and it is designated low density residential, but obviously within that designated growth area of the town's official plan. Next slide, please. The zoning of the property is a CBD or central business district zone. The central business district zone does not have any, for example, lot coverage requirements. For example, apartment buildings, it allows for 0 meter setbacks on all respective sides, and then a maximum of 4-story heights within this zoning category. Next slide, please. So just briefly, this is the severance sketch. What's intended to occur is that the existing Part 2, which is currently formulates as part of the site of Part 1, it's intended to be severed and merged with Part 3. Right now, there's obviously a single detached dwelling on each respective lot at 127 Chisholm, and then as well as a single detached dwelling on 15 John Street. So Part 2 would allow for a minor expansion of the rear yard for Part 3 being 15 John Street. And then essentially it allows for, I'll call it the right sizing of Part 1 for a future potential development application, which has not been submitted to date. Next slide, please. So just to linger on that, this is just a conceptual rendering of obviously what is potentially contemplated for the site. You can see on the left-hand side, there is a 4-story apartment build form that's shown at 127 Chisholm. And then the site, as I mentioned, the intent of the lot line adjustment is to essentially right size the existing lot fabric at 127 Chisholm Street to allow for that future development to potentially occur when the landowner decides to proceed with that. Next slide, please. So that summarizes my presentation. Obviously, we have read the recommendation report from staff. We have obviously no objections to the recommendations noted in there, and I'm happy to assist and answer with any questions. Thank you very much.
Mr. Demchak, I do note that we do have 2 letters of objection from a Brent Perlman and then Annie Mae and Len Fortune. Have you seen those? And would you care to comment?
Yes, thank you for that. So the first, I'll say comment is just related to, the potential concern for increased density resulting from the future development of the subject properties. Again, this is a designated strategic growth area by the province, by the region, as well as by the town, being within Kerr Village. This is intended to intensify within these properties. And again, it's noted that it's a central business district zone. So if this property does in the future get redeveloped with a potential building up to 4 stories in height, that is permitted as of right. There's no variances required to facilitate that potential development. And this lot line adjustment, although it does not change anything in terms of development today, again, this is an area that is obviously intended to change. And you can see in that initial surrounding context image that I provided, this is an area where there is existing density and obviously a range of building heights. The second component is obviously the other comment related to impact on neighboring property lines and concern related to that. There's no change that is being proposed to any of the adjacent neighboring property lines. This is just a lot line adjustment for 2 existing properties that are owned by my client and do obviously touch each other at the rear of the respective sites.
Okay, thank you for that. Madam Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in with questions or interested to speak? And while you look, are there any questions from the committee members to Mr. Demchak?
Madam Chair, there have been no calls.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just concerned, wondering why the lot line is going to be so unusual. You have a skinny little piece, and then you have a bigger block. Just could you explain why it's necessary to shape it that way?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. If the committee secretary could please pull up my presentation again. I think it's the third last slide. I'd like to just linger on that. It would help maybe just answer that question. One more down, please. Oh, sorry. One
Yeah.
more slide. Oh, sorry, one more slide forward. Oh, thank you. Yes. So on the right-hand side is an image of what the potential built form for that building would look like. And so I made a comment earlier in my presentation about obviously trying to right size this lot. So it is, as you described, a bit of an awkward configuration. It's not perfectly rectangular in shape, but this configuration allows for two components. Number one, it allows for what the client wants to potentially build. And then it obviously allows for future access staircases, which are shown on the bottom left of this image, which is where there's going to be an emergency exit for the up to four-story apartment building. And it meets obviously the building code requirements. So it's not perfectly rectangular as shown. However, it does meet obviously the intent of what the client wants to proceed with. And further, as I mentioned, it right sizes the lot relative to the design of the building.
The sketch that we're looking at is the proposed development of number 15 John or number 127 Chisholm. I see the picture of the three-story building, not that. You're talking about the site plan. Which property is that showing me?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is 127 Chisholm. So 15 John would remain as is. There are no changes happening to that existing dwelling, obviously with the exception of a small addition to that property, which would marginally increase the rear yard amenity space.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I just want to understand. Did you say that in the particular zoning, the central business district, that there's no maximums on residential floor area, or residential floor area is not a concern here? The size of the lot relative to how much you can build?
That's correct. Through you, Madam Chair, there is no floor area ratio requirements in the CBD zone. Further, there's no maximum coverage requirements in the CBD zone. And you can, based on the zoning bylaw, you can build to all respective lot lines. So it's 0 meter setbacks to the side, rear, and front lot lines. And then it also has a maximum height of 4 stories permitted as of right within that zoning category.
So this isn't happening so that some of the 127 Chisholm is much bigger than 15 John, apparently. I'm not sure, but anyhow, in lot size. So this isn't happening so you can well, obviously you can build a bigger house or a building on 115 John when you add this. I'm still puzzled. Why is that skinny little stretch there? That little skinny little part. It's hard to see. On the sketch, it's on the north side to the left. Why is that skinny stretch there? Why do you need it shaped like that? Why don't you just go straight along that side lot line?
Thank you for that question. So through you, Madam Chair, that I'll call it skinny little piece that you're referring to at the bottom left of the image. That is obviously to accommodate from a building code requirement, and my understanding, speaking with the project architect, that is to allow for emergency exit and access stairs at the rear in that location of the property. And so I'll call it it's a point in the building that obviously like very clearly sticks out. And what the client wants to do, instead of just completely covering the back half of the property and severing the rear and building to the full lot lines, from their perspective, this is an opportunity to right size the lot. And then again, it provides, because they do live at 15 John Street, it provides them the opportunity to use a bit more amenity space in the future for that single detached dwelling.
I'm still confused. And I'm confused because of this, maybe because this site plan is orientated in the wrong way, maybe. I'm not talking about the piece at the bottom. I'm talking about the skinny piece at the top of that sketch. that what you were answering my question to? The skinny piece at the top for access for something to do with fire code? Seems to
No,
be,
so
I don't even understand what skinny piece you're speaking to.
well, I'm talking about, can you not blow up that, could we not blow up that sketch? It's such a, it's hard. Yeah, keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay, there. Now at the top of that sketch, the rear of the property, not at the bottom, at the top, there's a skinny little strip. Why do you need that? Why don't you just keep that property line, go right back and do that? That's what I'd like my first question to be.
Where it says 87.5?
Yes.
Okay.
sorry, Ms. McKellar, can you, where do you see
Do you see where
87.5?
the tree lines are? The trees, and then there's an X through the third tree on the top, right underneath registered plan. Yes, exactly, that area, 87.5. Is that the skinny piece that you're referring to, Mr. Dickey?
That's the skinny piece I'm referring to, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, I see. So the dark outline, obviously, maybe I'll try to explain this a little bit further. The red outline is obviously where the lot fabric is proposed. And then the dark outline, the very thick dark outline, is where I'll call the building footprint is shown for a future potential building. There are some, notwithstanding the zoning bylaw allows for 0-meter setbacks, there are some setbacks that are proposed from those lot lines. So where you see where that first jog is, you see 88.3, and then above that it says board fence.
Mm-hmm.
That is the existing lot line for that portion of the property. And then the existing lot line obviously extends beyond that to right at the back of the existing property. What the client wants to do, again, to just match, generally speaking, match the lot line with the future potential building, is provide for a jog in the lot line that matches that built form. And then you can see by doing so, because they have obviously a rear yard deck at 15 John, they have stairs that exist there, and they're going to have to rejog some components of their existing landscaping. But what they're trying to do is add some very minor additional amenity space where possible, while still allowing for this future 4-story building.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Dickey?
No. Okay, the black line is the building line, not the property line.
It's the potential building line,
Yeah,
but
not
for
the
in the
property line.
future. Yes. The property line is the dashed red line. And then the area above that is the little amenity space that they would have added to the back, where the deck over stucco foundation is, right underneath there to the left. Is that correct, Mr. Demchek? Am I explaining this correctly?
That is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we zoom out? Are you satisfied, or can we?
Oh, no, I just want to make a statement to the agent here. I don't
Okay.
understand why, I still don't understand, and I don't care anymore. I shouldn't say it like that. I just can't understand why you can't draw a straight line somewhere, and when you separate, when you take off the one from the one property and add to the other property. I don't see why you have to do this jog line. I'm not convinced, or not convinced. I don't understand why you have to do this jog line. Why can't you just do a straight line so the lot line is regular? Because that is one of the criteria that we approve this severance. Go ahead, sorry.
That's okay. So I've got a few comments, I guess, that pertains to that. There isn't a requirement necessarily in the central business district zone, unlike other residential zones, for example, in terms of, like I mentioned, setbacks, but also how lot lines are articulated. And in some instances in the town, this being one of them, you sometimes have, I'll call it irregular lot lines that deal with a more urban fabric within the town. And that's but what is being proposed in this instance to accommodate a future potential building. From my perspective, again, this is just right sizing based on what the client wants. And the existing, notwithstanding the existing lot fabric has that straight line that you've stipulated. It's not a requirement in this zone category, and nor is it in this instance necessary to accommodate this build form. I realize this is perhaps a unique situation. I'm obviously, as a planner, I'm before this committee in many instances, and majority of them are for residential zones within the town. And not often do we deal with these types of applications, obviously, before the committee. In this instance, just to linger on that, this is typically an application that is being dealt with via a delegated approval by the director of planning. However, in this instance, because there was two letters of concern from the public, it does come before the committee to be addressed.
If town staff would be kind enough to zoom out, I'd appreciate that. And I mean, out of the presentation so we can see all the members. I can't see if anyone has risen their hand or would like to speak to anything. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Demchuk, I'm going to try to sum this up very succinctly. Tell me if I got it correct. You've got the two adjacent lots. The one parcel's got a house on it that pretty much covers the entire lot with zero backyard. And it appears from the sketch that the house on John, their deck and stairs actually encroach into part two that you're trying to sever off and add to that to basically legalize their existing deck, add a little bit of backyard to that existing house, and the property lines the way it is because you've already got a design for the Chisholm Street parcel and you don't need all the space, so you're trying to create a backyard for the house on John Street.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, Mr. Tlesky, that is correct. It does facilitate marginal additional amenity space at the rear. Like you mentioned, allows for the existing deck and its condition to actually be more legalized. Number one, there is obviously a shed that does have to be removed as part of this application to deal with that future lot line adjustment. But yes, it provides some marginal increase in rear yard amenity space for 15 John.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Sorry to be a pain, but is there not common ownership between these properties? I see the name Luber seems to show up a couple of times when you mention the names of the owners in the letter or whatever. So are these two properties, 15 John and 127 Chisholm, not necessarily under the exact same names, but somewhat family connected or something like that?
Yes, the titles are, thank you. Yes, the ownership on title is slightly different, but there is common interest in ownership between the two properties.
Okay, second question. On John Street seemed to have street townhouses towards the river, and on the corner there seemed to be a relatively modern street townhouse type building. But 15 John Street is a house. So it would be logical to me that at some point in the near future, if it would allow, that 15 John Street would be developed in something similar to what else is to its east and to its west. So the fact that this existing house on 15 John Street needs a little bit of extra backyard and in that shape doesn't make sense to me. Its highest best use would be for development in accordance with what surrounds it on both sides. So I'm still don't understand why you have to have that weird shape. So anyhow, I'm just making that comment. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no further comments, has anyone called in, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls.
Fine. Then we will take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Yeah, Mr. Dickey, go ahead.
Based upon my review of the owner's application, site plans, my site visit, together with the presentation by the owner's consultant, planning staff's report, and the neighbor's comments, it is my opinion that this does not meet all of the criteria for severance. In particular, it does not satisfy the criteria that the dimensions and shape of the proposed lots shall be consistent with the lot fabric of the neighborhood. And therefore, I put forth the motion that the application is applied for be denied.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay. I see none. All those in support? Okay. All those opposed? Susan, you need to vote. Which way did you go? I didn't see your hand. So you're opposed. You're opposed. Okay. So that motion fails. And I will take a different motion for. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, looking at the lot fabric drawing in this application, having an inconsistent shaped lot seems pretty consistent in this neighborhood in my review. Madam Chair, what's before us is simply a lot adjustment, not looking at the future development of either parcel, if there's going to be any at this time. I'm satisfied that the end result of this severance lot addition is going to be a more usable property fabric for the John Street property. And based on the applicant's information, not a hindrance to the Chisholm property. Madam Chair, I do believe that this application meets the requirements of the Planning Act. Don't believe a plan of subdivision is required in this instance. And I'd make that approval subject to the following 5 conditions: that the owner applicant submit a digital copy of the reference plan showing the lands to be conveyed, together with the registrable legal description of the lands to be conveyed to the Secretary Treasurer prior to the issuance of consent. That the owner applicant submit to the Secretary Treasurer a final certification fee payable to the town of Oakville at the rate prescribed at the time of payment. That the owner applicant provide proof of payment of any outstanding property taxes at the time of issuance of consent to the satisfaction of the town finance department. That the owner applicant and the adjoining landowner who is acquiring the severed lands, the acquiring owner, enter into a merger agreement with the town to be registered on title to both owners and adjoining owners' lands and pay the applicable fee to the satisfaction of the town. That the owner applicant submit a conceptual grading plan to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Tosky. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay. All those opposed? Okay, the motion carries and your application has been approved.
Thank you, members.
Thank you. Have a good evening. We are moving to the first application of the variance applications on our agenda this evening, and that will be.
Yes, I just want to say that when I was doing my site visits, I noticed that the property on 1178 Wood Place didn't have a sign.
1178 what? Okay.
There was a large woodrove in front, so I don't know if it was behind.
Okay, 1178 Wood Place. Okay. That's the last one on our agenda. Typically, we usually bring those comments up in the deferral time. Susan, did you see any signs up whatsoever?
No, there's no
Okay.
signs at all. And there was snow. The driveway hadn't been cleared at all. It was just a big wood road across and no sign.
Okay. Mr. Kieran, just hang tight. I haven't called the application yet, so let me deal with this first. Is the owner or agent for 1178 Wood Place present in the meeting right now?
Yes, he is.
Okay, can you bring him forth, please?
Sure.
Good evening, Mr. Bensel.
Good evening.
So upon our site visit, one of our committee members did not see signs posted on the lot lines as per the instructions for the application. Unfortunately, we will have to defer your application once again because of failure to post the sign. I understand there has been a couple of snowstorms, and we have to go through this once a year at the beginning of every year. Without fail, we have an applicant that comes before us that for some reason the signs have flown off or broken down or covered in some way, but it is your responsibility to maintain those signs at all times so that the notification and for the public remains intact for the period that it's supposed to be. So we will defer the application, and there will be a deferral fee.
Okay, well, there was a sign there, and we did email proof of picture, so we know it did fall down, and we were notified, and we did go back and post it back up. It could have came off through the snow plows. I don't know. I would have to contact the owner to find out.
Okay, well, you do that, and the secretary or treasurer will try and get you on the next available agenda once you've provided that proof.
Given this is our second deferral and we've gotten this far with the application, and I understand that sign has to be there, it's our responsibility. Is there any way we can request the deferral without the fee? We've already paid a fee before for the deferral, so we're just hoping.
Yes, yes. Typically, even though the winter is harsh and everything, we don't usually do that. But I'm willing to entertain it. I would maybe do a 50% if the rest of the members agree with me. Just because the storms that we've had in the past week haven't been things that we've seen in the past decade. So I will be lenient this time, but I am going on record that that's not going to be the case moving forward. We have this issue every January without fail, and you just happen to be the first one. So the members, what do you think about that proposition? Mr. Dickey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that's a reasonable thing because I went and looked at the property on Friday, which I think was before the storms, and there was a sign there. So it isn't as if it hasn't, I mean, no, for sure, but I meant it might not be that it hasn't been there for the 2 weeks. It must just, it does make sense that if it wasn't there when Price saw it, then it could have been because of this.
Okay, thank you for your input. Thank you. Does anyone else want to weigh in? Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I tend to take the position that owners are notified and advised of their responsibility to post and maintain a sign. And well, there are circumstances that are beyond one's control. The weather events were known, and it would be reasonable for the owner to have investigated it. I think this is a slippery slope towards accommodating folks not being focused on the objectives of continuous signposting.
Fair. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Okay. Does anyone else have anything to say? If not, we'll move a motion. You guys can vote, and then if it fails, then we'll pick another motion. No one has any comments? Okay, so yeah, Mr. Talowski, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll weigh in. Mr. Hardcastle's right. It snows every year. This applicant, this is the second deferral, but it's for two very different reasons. Everyone knew it was coming. Everyone knows it's their responsibility to have the sign up through the whole 10-day period, I think it is, plus the appeal period. It opens up to every windstorm, every snowstorm, somebody referring back to this application and say, well, you did it for them. So I understand the desire here to be lenient, but it's, as Mr. Hardcastle says, it is a slippery slope.
Yeah, I know, and I agree to an extent. So the suggestion is that we allow for a deferral with a 50% discount. You, all those that support that, please raise your hands. Okay, and all those opposed? Okay, very well. So then that motion fails. I'll take a motion from someone else.
Madam Chair, I'll move deferral of this application with the full fee payable.
Very well. All those in support? Very well. All those opposed? Okay, yeah, you will have to pay the full fee, Mr. Vansal. And we'll see you at your earliest convenience when everything goes through.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Very well. Sorry, Mr. Kieran. We'll move to your application. And that is application CAV. Okay, hold on. I'm on the wrong page. I apologize. Give me a second. Okay, we're back at A017 of 2025 at 1073 Cedar Grove Boulevard.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Joris Kieran. I am the agent for this application, and my firm also prepared the architectural design for this house. I'll do a brief presentation and then I'm happy to answer any questions. Before I start the presentation, I just want to mention a couple quick points. So we did have a conservation requirement on this property. A comment came in late, I think yesterday, from conservation, just confirming what I was going to mention is that we did, between the time we submitted this application and now we've actually gained approval from them. It's not technically a permit because they've issued what they call a letter of no concern, or a clearance letter, basically saying that they have no objections to the development. So that's been obtained. The other thing is that town planning staff has no objections to the 4 variances that we're seeking this evening. So I'll get into the presentation. We have 4 variances being requested. Variance 1 and 2 are really the same thing. It's just window wells that are slightly larger than what's permitted. These are in the side yard, but because the side yard is still quite wide, even with the window wells, it leaves sufficient room for access and drainage, which is the main reason for the bylaw. So, and we're mainly making these window wells wider, not so much deeper. So that's variance 1 and 2. Variance 3 is speaking to the side yard setbacks. And this is a little bit of a unique area in that it's an RL1 zone, which has rather large setbacks, side yard setbacks, 4.2 meters, generally speaking. But because the frontage here is a bit reduced also from what a typical RL1 lot would be, most of the houses on the street, maybe not most, but the majority of a good percentage of the houses on the street, existing houses that also have similar zoning, have smaller setbacks as well. So it's very common on the street. Some of them are the house right next door has about 2.8 meter setbacks. And then we have 1073 Cedar Grove has side yard setbacks of about 1.95 meters. So that's just 2 examples. I couldn't find committee rulings for this, but 1060, 1054, 1048, and 1042 all have also smaller side yard setbacks, well short of the 4.2 meters. So the point being that the smaller setbacks that we're requesting are more or less in keeping with what's happening on the streets, and what we are requesting is 2.51 meters from the 4.2 that is required. Last variance 4, that is to do with lot coverage. So we are exceeding the lot coverage a little bit here. 25% is permitted, and I've just sort of roughly highlighted the back. What's the back porch here? And that's it. The back covered porch in its entirety is really the reason for the overage. So it's not really the house itself, it's the porch. If we go to the next slide, please. So this is the front of the house. The porch is occurring at the rear of the house. You don't see it from the streetscape. The architecture here is sympathetic to the neighborhood and sympathetic to breaking up the massing. We have basically a 1-story garage element with a roof line that goes down to the first story. And then we have 2 primary gables with lower roof lines as well. Not quite 1 story, but about 1.5 stories. So that provides for a nice breakup of the massing. We also have a sort of a 1-story front portico feature, and then various articulation occurring throughout the front facade. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit more of a clear demonstration of that covered porch at the rear. That is, it's set into the house as well. It doesn't even project really much beyond the rear of the house. It's set in, and that's all of the lot coverage overage is accounted for in that feature. Next slide, please. And then this is just a side elevation view showing that same porch, and just to demonstrate that the majority of it is a 1-story structure. There is a little bit of the second floor that projects over it, but about 2/3 of it is 1-story structure. So it's pretty benign in terms of massing. Next slide, please. So this is the same porch just from the rear elevation view. Again, just to demonstrate it's a 1-story structure. And then last slide. Yeah, so this is not really particularly relevant to any variance that we're requesting, but it's just showing the other side of the dwelling and the shape that it has, just for context. Yeah, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kieran. Are there any questions, items of clarification of Mr. Kieran at this time? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls.
Very well, then I will take the matter into committee and we'll take a motion. Go ahead, Ms. Price.
Okay. In consideration of all the written submissions by the owner and town staff, I am of the opinion that the variances are considered minor in nature, desirable for the use of the land, and in keeping with the general intent of the town's official plan, livable Oakville, and zoning bylaw. The applicant can proceed with their development subject to the following conditions: that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated December 9th, 2024, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well, thank you. Is there a discussion on these recommendations? I see none. All those in support? Okay. And your application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Okay. Application CAV 019 of 2025 at 1358 Marblehead Road. Again, that's CAV 019 of 2025 at 1358 Marblehead Road. If you're interested in speaking to the application, please call 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. I have the agent as Kruti Shah or Mr. Kaur.
Madam Chair, I'm just trying to move him into the meeting.
Very well, thank you.
Madam Chair, I keep getting a declined message from him.
Okay, keep trying him, and once he comes back in, we'll attend to his application. I'll just move on to the next one. Application is.
Sorry, I think he's coming in now.
Okay.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of Committee of Adjustment. My name is Kruti Shah and I'm representing this case 1358 Marblehead Road. We are proposing the below grade entrance in the backyard. Zoning bylaw allowed 3 meter maximum we can extend, but we are proposing to 2.52 meter. I think this is a minor in nature and I have gone through the application and it's supported. Any question, please ask.
Very well, thank you. Are there any questions of Ms. Shaw at this time from the members? If I can just have the screen back, please, so I can see. Thank you. Are there any questions from the members or items of clarification for Ms. Shaw? Okay, I see none. No one has called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, no calls.
Very well, then let's take a motion. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit and having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, and having heard the words from the applicant, I'm satisfied that this requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act. Accordingly, I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to two conditions, those being that the stair be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated December 10th, 2024, and that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Application CAV 020 of 2025 at 9 South Haven. Oh, yeah. Place. Again, it's A020 of 2025 at 9 South Haven Place. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Radomski.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I have a brief oral presentation with respect to 9 South Haven Place. My name is Len Radomski. I represent the homeowners, Mr. and Mrs. Scott. They're looking to have a hot tub placed on their existing above grade deck. This is a technical consent, as there is no official backyard with the exception of the raised deck. Below that deck is the driveway and garage access. We are proposing to place a hot tub approximately 0.6 meters from the rear of the home and 0.0 meters from the shared property line and approximately 4.3 meters above grade, given that it's on a concrete deck. The homeowner has undertaken an engineering report showing that the hot tub fully loaded can be placed in this location. And that is the end of my presentation.
Very well, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Radomski at this time or items of clarification? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you're going to position the hot tub so it's 0.6 meters from the rear wall of the property, but you're putting it right against the side wall of the adjacent townhouse to the east. Like, why do you need to put it there and not allow a space there? Why can't you put it somewhere else?
This gives the homeowner maximum screening from the park that is to the south of the property. The homeowner has discussed this with the neighbors and there are no objections. There is a letter of support within our package.
And wouldn't you be concerned about flashing and noise right beside that neighbor? I would assume that neighbor has a living room right on the other side of that wall. You know if there's a living room there, or is it the kitchen?
There is a living room there, and there is also an existing 1.8 meter fence on top of that deck.
Does the hot tub extend depth-wise beyond that wall? The neighbor's wall goes back, I don't know, like 7 feet. Does the hot tub, will it extend beyond that brick wall?
It will partially extend beyond that, yes.
And the reason he wants to put the owner wants to put it there is because he wants some privacy from the park to the rear. Why can't he move it over to the other side of the house, to the west side of the house?
The location was recommended by the structural engineer.
Because it can't.
Because it's closer to the bearing points.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Okay, I see none. And you said no one has called, Madam Secretary Treasurer, right?
Correct. There have been no calls.
Very well. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm going to move that this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the four tests of the Planning Act. It sounds like the applicant's done their homework with respect to the best location structurally for this, and with the consent of the neighboring owner, I don't see it there'll be an impact of this variance. I would make the approval subject to the hot tub being placed in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated December 2024.
Very well, thank you. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, all those opposed? Thank you. Your application has been approved. One opposed.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Have a good evening.
You as well. Good night.
Application CAV 021 of 2025 at 283 Balsam Drive. Again, it's the CAV 021 of 2025 at 283 Balsam Drive. I will note that there are letters of support from Margot Vito, Sarah Weatherhead, Fraser Horn, Aaron Koshar, Samantha Schwang, and Lawrence Chow. Go ahead, Mr. Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Just double checking my audio is okay.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
My name is Tyler Peck from W&D Associates. We're the applicants and planners for this application. The application is for the construction of a new two-story detached house on the vacant lot at 283 Balsam Drive with a one-story attached garage and associated driveway and landscaping. Next slide, please. As the chair has noted, on file with the committee are 5 letters of support from neighbors all along Balsam Drive, including the immediately adjacent property to the south. As outlined in our planning rationale cover letter, we also met with town planning staff on a pre-application basis for this application, made minor revisions to the proposal to reflect their comments, and are in support of their staff report, which does not object to the proposed variances, and we also agree with the recommended conditions in the town planning staff report. There are no objections from any other divisions or agencies circulated on the application. Next slide, please. By way of background, this site is located on the east side of Balsam Drive and is a vacant and separate property which formerly contained a detached house which was previously demolished. The east side of Balsam Drive is characterized by deep landscaped front yards and 2 to 3 story detached houses of various architectural styles, many with forecourt driveway areas. Next slide, please. This is reflected in the street view image shown here. I note there was formerly a driveway along this frontage, and as I'll demonstrate in the following slides, the proposed detached house has been sensitively designed to reflect and reinforce the character of Balsam Drive. Next slide, please. The property is located within the low-density residential areas in both Oakville's official plan and zoning bylaw. The proposed use, height, density are all permitted by policy and in the bylaw, and there are no variances with respect to these matters. Next slide, please. The proposed variances as listed here reflect the unique nature, size, and dimensions of the property and reflect a design and siting of the main components of the house and garage, which are in keeping with the character of Balsam Drive. Next slide. The site plan shows how the proposed house has been designed to fit both on the property with generous setbacks, but also in the context of the location of neighboring houses, with the proposed T-shaped designs accomplishing a few objectives, from firstly generally matching the building lengths of the adjacent houses to providing for a driveway and forecourt area that reinforces the pattern of the street. Next slide, please. This is shown on the variance diagram here, which outlines the relationship of the proposed setbacks and building length to the adjacent properties. And I note that the building length includes both the one-story attached garage portion at the front of the house, as well as a one-story rear canopy and covered outdoor area. That doesn't include indoor area, but is included in the building depth calculation under the bylaw. And both of these one-story areas also further reduce the massing at those ends of the house. Next slide. With respect to the proposed garage projection, we worked with staff and we agree with their assessment that the single-story garage will be screened from view and from the public realm by existing mature vegetation, as well as enhanced landscaping within the front yard and the dimensions of the driveway. The intent of this regulation is to avoid prominent garage doors facing the street and dominating the streetscape over the main living areas. In this case, the garage design is one story. It includes materials that's similar to their main house, a side-facing condition which maintains the prominence of the front main wall facing the street, and that front main wall includes windows and other architectural features. The side-facing garage condition is common on the street. There's a side-facing garage in the adjacent property, and it's also found on two other nearby properties with forecourt areas, including 265 and 319 Balsam Drive, further demonstrating this proposal's fit within the neighborhood. Next slide, please. A modest increase in the garage area provides for a functional two-car garage with adequate circulation areas and storage to meet the needs of the owner. And the ground floor plan here shows the generous side yard setbacks provided by this proposal on this unique shaped lot. Next slide, please. The renderings of the house here show how all of the elements that I've just described work together to result in a sensitively designed infill house for the neighborhood. Next slide. Our cover letter and planning rationale, as well as the town staff report, provide a detailed analysis of the four tests, which I can discuss should the committee members have any questions. If you want to go to a few slides down, as a summary, the proposed house and the required variances are the result of a carefully considered and sensitive design exercise that's been undertaken with regard to the character of Balsam Drive, the contemporary needs of the owner, and in consultation with town planning and urban design staff. As noted, we don't object to the recommended conditions of planning staff, and we respectfully request the committee's approval of the application. I'm happy to address the committee's questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or items of clarification for Mr. Beck at this time? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
We do have someone in the meeting that would like to speak to the application.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'm moving him in now.
Hi, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Bilan.
Hi, good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kuldeep Bilan, and we are the owners of 291 Balsam, the directly adjoining neighbor to the north of 283 Balsam. I apologize for not sending our objections in advance. This is our first time through this process. With that said, we are strongly opposed to the application for minor variance for 283 Balsam Drive. This proposal, as submitted, has a significant impact negatively on our property as well as the neighborhood in general, and we're strenuously opposed to the variances being sought. The entire plan is in opposition to two bylaws by significant amounts. These are major variances, not minor. I'll walk through our objections to the relevant variances now. Firstly, for variance to permitted dwelling depth. The proposal for the dwelling depth is 34 meters or almost double what the bylaw allows. We are the only neighbor affected by this, and from what we can tell, there's no precedent or justification for the length of the structure in the wall that is 25 feet at its max height, being a full 45 feet longer, almost double what the bylaw allows when the orientation of the proposed development is opposite of the rest of the neighborhood. If this variance were approved, it is oppressive to our property because it creates a situation where we are going to be looking at a giant structure and wall running all the way down our property, well into the backyard, well beyond what the bylaw allows. It will create significant shading and reduction of sight lines on my property, and because it runs well beyond the proposed primary structure and the others in the neighborhood, it is even more obstructive. If the applicant had respected the bylaw, it would not be as big a deal because it would have run in parallel to the back of my house, which would have been reasonable. There is no reasonable justification for the wall to run 45 feet longer than what the bylaw allows, and I'm the only house that's actually impacted. My understanding is that the intent of the bylaw is to restrict building length and to reduce the visual impact of a dwelling from the street. This proposal doesn't address either. The proposed wall is visually unattractive and has a major impact on our property in terms of its dominance, aesthetic, reduced sight lines, and imposition on my property. The applicant has done nothing to mitigate the impact of the variance, as evidenced by the fact that it's 45 feet longer than the bylaw allows and runs well beyond the primary structure. Lastly, this variance has been termed as minor. Again, it is a full 45 feet longer than what the bylaw allows, or almost double. That is not minor in any way, shape, or form. Variance 4, projection of the garage. Front of the garage will be built in front of the main dwelling, which is in opposition to the bylaw and which will impact our existing appealing view. It will also impede my view of the street, especially from the second-story balcony of my house. The permitted depth of the garage should not exceed 1.5 meters, and the proposed garage will be 13.44 meters. Again, well outside of the bylaw and not a minor variance. The applicant has done nothing to mitigate the impact of this variance. All they're doing is putting the house in the opposite orientation of all other houses on the street, whereby the greatest and only impact is felt by me. Lastly, variance 5, main wall proportionality. The bylaw calls for 50% permitted. This proposal calls for 0%. This again flows into the objection on variance 2. The property is the only house that will be facing south, which is the complete opposite of the rest of the homes on the street. The garage being in front of the house by 13 meters instead of a max 1.5 meters results in this orientation. This impact is made greater because the house is 45 feet longer than the bylaw allows. Not only is there an aesthetic issue, as the house is the only one with this orientation, but from our interpretation, the projection being cohesive with the streetscape is the intent of the bylaw. Again, the applicant has done nothing to mitigate the impact of this variance. All they're doing is putting their house in the opposite orientation of all the other houses on the street, whereby the greatest impact is felt by me. I would like to make 3 final comments if the committee will permit me. In their comments received report, planning staff state, staff are of the opinion that the revised proposal represents appropriate development of the subject property. The variance is minor in nature and will not create adverse impacts to adjoining properties or the existing neighborhood character. We find this comment fundamentally at odds with the proposal. There's a building structure that is now going to run along the depth of the property, 13 meters or 45 feet longer than the bylaw allows, and the main wall proportionality is 0% versus the bylaw at 50%. There's no basis to state that this variance is minor or that it will not create an adverse impact to adjoining properties. As a resident of the adjoining property, that would now be subject to this obstructive structure as well as visually unappealing wall that runs from the beginning of my house all the way into the backyard. That is almost double what's allowable by the bylaw. That's just not accurate. Further, this project would clearly create an adverse impact to the existing neighborhood character. The design is completely different. The orientation is south, whereas every other home is facing west, and is definitely out of character for the neighborhood. Lastly, the applicant had a number of people in the neighborhood sign letters of support as part of their package. Very interestingly, we were never approached, which tells you that they were fully cognizant of the fact that it severely impacts our property rather than anyone else's, and we would have never supported this application. That demonstrates they are aware that these are not minor variances and are completely obstructive to our property and not in line with the neighborhood. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. We please ask that you take these objections into account.
Thank you, Mr. Bellin. Are there any questions or items of clarification from the neighbor? Okay, I see none. Mr. Peck, it's your turn to respond to those concerns. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for the comments. We certainly respectfully disagree that there hasn't been any effort made to mitigate potential impacts on neighboring properties. The design is thoughtful in terms of the location of the main 2-story built form, which is common in the neighborhood, and there are no variances associated with building height, particularly with respect to the orientation of that 2-story portion, directly fitting in a line of front and rear yard setbacks comparable to the neighboring properties. As I noted, the building length on paper, the variance includes the 1-story attached garage portion as well as the 1-story rear rear canopy portion. In respect to the design of the north-facing wall, which will directly impact the property at 291 Balsam, it also has been sensitively designed to include privacy screening along the window wells, for example, and also includes generous setbacks from the side yard. The setbacks proposed are 4.59 meters from the one-story attached garage portion and extend as far as 6.75 meters in the rear portion of the property. That results in an overall separation distance between the proposed dwelling and the existing dwelling at 291 Balsam of between 13 and 15.5 meters. This is well in excess, if not of the separation distances between other houses on the Balsam Drive, on the east side of Balsam Drive. With respect to the orientation of the house, there are a number of buildings along the street, as committee members may have noted on their site visit, that contain a side-facing garage condition for a vehicle forecourt. It's not unusual. The building is not oriented south. The main living room space and the main front walls, as noted in town planning staff's comments, including articulation and privacy screening of the living room area, do face west, as per the character of the neighborhood. Other elements of the house face east and some face south, and that is in order to take advantage of the rear yard area as well as the orientation of the building of the site, the house to the south, with respect to, again, fit of the buildings within that area. That is my response to the comments raised, and I'm happy to address any further comments that the committee might have.
Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of the neighbors' comments on the north wall, I'm not without sympathy for his comments. Aside from the area where you've got screening, it looks like they're essentially going to be facing a very long, very bland, very cube-shaped brick wall. Doesn't seem like there's been any effort to try to mitigate that. And I'm struggling with how you just said it's sensitively designed.
The elevation includes articulation. It's not a blank wall. It includes windows and privacy screening as well as articulation in the wall location. It's also set back greater than the bylaw requirement. And the main portion of the two-story building is also directly opposite the garage doors of the house to the north, and it's been oriented again within that line of front and rear yard setbacks along Balsam Drive. And the rear and front yard portions are also lower at 1 story, and that is to mitigate visual impacts of the length of the proposed dwelling on this very deep lot.
And secondly, the neighbor implied that you purposely spoke to the rest of the neighborhood and not him. Do you care to comment on that? Because if that's true, I find that troubling.
My client undertook the owner of the house, of the lot rather, undertook the consultation with the neighbors. I understand that there is currently a disagreement related to fence encroachments between my client and Mr. Billen, which is a completely separate civil matter from the merits of the planning application that we're dealing with today. So I wasn't directly involved in the discussions with the neighboring properties, but I do understand that the owner has had discussions with all neighbors.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the members of the... Mr. Brown, we've heard your statement. I appreciate everything you've said, but it's now time for the committee's discussion and questions. I saw another hand up, Mr. Talowski.
Madam Chair, a question of staff. Ms. Buckerfield, I was actually surprised to see in this instance the support for the garage projection, as we've seen comments from staff in the past that suggest landscaping is not a sufficient mitigation because landscaping can come and go. And yet in this instance, staff seem to be supporting what I don't see staff normally supporting as a result of landscaping. I'm wondering if I'm seeing it as a bit of a contradiction. I'm hoping you can help me with that.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for that question. I think it's a very valid question because we're fairly consistent approach to the garages. I think that there probably could have been a bit more commentary in the report around how this street is unique from other streets and the character of how the houses are situated, which would have gone potentially beyond just the discussion around the landscaping, because I do agree that landscaping can come and go. But I think part of the support for it as well is that there is the preservation of the mature trees through the design. It seemed that it was sensitively done in other ways. So hopefully that can provide some rationale for you.
Thank you.
Any further questions or items of clarification? Okay, I see none. We'll take the matter into committee. Who would like to start the discussion? Move a motion. I'll give you a few minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to get the ball rolling here. This section of Balsam is unique. It's large lot character, the built form, large grand homes with large lots. It is unique in the context. I'm struggling with two key pieces of the proposal that's in front of us right now. One is the garage projection, and the other is the depth, dwelling depth. I think the two are interrelated and tend to work together towards contributing to the built form we're seeing. Mr. Tulowski has highlighted something that I've noted myself. That is that historically we've seen commentary that does not support landscaping as a solution to built form problems. I can't get past those issues. I think that this building and the resultant variances are out of character with the area. They're not minor in nature, and I will not support the application, and I put forward a motion to deny.
Okay, thank you. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Go ahead, Mr. Tulowski.
Madam Chair, I have to agree with Mr. Hardcastle and the neighbor. The combination of the garage projection and the length is just too much to overcome here. I can't find it to be desirable. So I can't support this application, and it just, unfortunately, it seems like deja vu all over again. The last time this property was in front of us, it was deferred because significant concern from a neighbor which hadn't been spoken to, which is disappointing to see it happening again.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I see none. The motion on the table is to deny the application. All those in support? Okay. All those opposed? None opposed. The application has been denied, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Okay, application CAV 022 of 2025 at 517 Lees Lane. Again, that's application CAV 022 of 2025 at 517 Lees Lane. Go ahead, Mr. Castillo.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Gerardo Castillo from Keystone Home Designs. I'm here representing Ms. Kelly Da Fonseca, which is the owner for 517 Lees Lane. We're here to apply for a single minor variance for gross floor area of 42.42%, where the maximum is 40%. So basically, we're talking about 18.11 square meters. Basically, the increase of the RFA is moderate, and it can be attributed that we're installing an elevator, which creates quite a few, hallways and access points to the different levels, including the garage. The homeowner has the intention to eventually bring in her parents to move in, which is pretty common these days. If you can move to the slide number 2, please. So as you can see, what we did with the design, the overall mass and scale of the dwellings is pretty moderated by several architectural features, including the two small front porches at the front and the lowering of the top roof, and especially the lowering of the roof above the garage, which this creates nice architectural features like dormers. If you can slide to the 3rd slide, please. So we did manage to visit 10 of the adjacent neighbors. It was a pretty cold day, and with the snow, it was a bit hard. But we managed to talk for a long time with 5 of them. We even got some signatures. And the other 5, we left the notes and some of the drawings with them. Everybody was okay with it. As far as I know, a few of the neighbors have been there for like 50, 60 years. They were happy with the design, and they were happy that the street was changing. One of the things they noticed that, especially along Bridge Street, there's a lot of new homes that are, they seem a lot larger than ours, and they seem to probably go into committee of adjustment. If you can slide to the next slide. Well, that's the signatures from the neighbors. If you go to the next one. As you can see, the red line is the minimum setback required for this building, and we are way within the minimum setbacks from the sides and from the front and the back. We can move to the next slide. Again, you can see there on Bridge Road, even on this shot, there's a lot of construction going on there, a lot of new buildings. So the area is changing. The design that we have and the mass of the building is pretty common in this area. If you look at the corner house of 513, you'll see on the next slide we're kind of maintaining the same shapes as them, same scale. So nothing out of the ordinary in this area. And if you can slide, I'll go over the next 4 slides. slowly you'll see the different houses in the area that have the same sort of mass. You can go to the next 2 or 3. Some even larger, just pretty plain, straight up with not much of dormers or anything like that. They're maximizing their footprint. And just at the end, you can see my last 2 slides. I'm showing the elevations, and you can see the different heights in roofs, dormers, and the north and south elevations to the neighbors. We don't really have any windows. You can go to the last slide. We have minimum windows, so we're keeping some privacy to them. And the back elevation that you see there with the double height window, that basically faces the property at the back on Bridge Road that we're just facing a garage. So overall, there's a lot of privacy. I guess with that, we can conclude my presentation. Thank you for your time. If you have any open questions, I'm open for them.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Are there any questions or items of clarification, Mr. Castillo, at this time? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and take a motion then. Go ahead, Ms. Price.
Okay, in consideration of the site visit I took and written submissions by the owner and the town staff, I am of the opinion that the variance is considered minor in nature, desirable for the use of the land, and in keeping with the general intent of the town's official plan and livable Oakville and zoning bylaws. The applicant can proceed with the development plan subject to the following conditions. The dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated November 11th, 2024, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if the building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Okay. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Good evening.
Have a good night.
Night.
Application CAV 024 of 2025 at 482 Brookside Drive. Again, that's 024 2025 at 482 Brookside Drive. I will note that I have a letter of objection from an Anne and George Schneider. And I have the agent here as Mr. Tom Kobesenko. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for taking our project for consideration tonight. My name is Tom Kobesenko. I'm from Oracle Blue Architects. I'm representing Mr. Tadros and his family for this property. Next slide, please. I'll just start off by saying this application was in front of committee back in 2022 with the exact same variances. It's the same exact design. Nothing has changed. What happened was we were still just after COVID, I guess. The market conditions were not favorable for development at the time. Financial constraints were present, and so the owners at the time decided not to pursue the project. And unfortunately, we run into not being able to comply with the 2-year limitation of a building permit being issued. In fact, we wanted to apply for the building permit with about 2 or 3 months ahead of expiration, but given our experience with town staff, how long permits take in the town of Oakville, we did not feel confident that we would be able to get a permit in time. So upon consultation with committee staff, we were encouraged to resubmit this for review again for the committee. So we're seeking the same 3 variances as last time. It's an increase of the garage area from 45 square meters to 57.4, and that is to allow for a tandem garage with no visual impact from the street and essentially no massing impact either. Variance number 2 is an increase in residential floor area from 41% to 44.5. Just to allow the layout to function for our clients. And variance number 3 is to increase the lot coverage from 35% to 37.3%. And that is primarily to permit a 1-story rear covered porch, as well as we have a front porch. So essentially 1-story elements with no impact to the neighbors, I would argue. Next slide, please. This is just a picture of the existing conditions without snow in case anybody wanted to think back to summer days. Next slide, please. This is the site plan. I will note this particular zoning does permit 1.2 meter side yards, which we are in full compliance with. We're not asking for any side yard reductions or anything like that. So I'll just keep that in mind as we address a couple of comments that we received from our neighbors. The dash line within the darker black line is the 2nd story outline, which illustrates that we are stepping the 2nd floor dwelling back, especially above the garage, on both sides, and then slightly to the back and slightly on the what is it, east side, I guess. So there is a bit of a step back just to reduce massing in the middle. Next slide, please. Not really pertinent to this application, but I just will highlight that this project will require 3 trees to be removed just to permit construction, and we will of course work with forestry and through the DESP process to comply with all other regulations and those kind of things. We'll get a tree permit, tree removal permit. Next slide, please. This is the basement layout. The only thing I want to highlight here is that the basement walkout, this will again speak to one of the concerns from the neighbors. The deep area of excavation on this property will be really at the back where the basement walkout is, because that requires step footings to permit that basement walkout to exist. 4 feet with 4 feet below the lowest level of the foundation. So I'll come back to that when addressing the neighbors' comments. But other than that, we're not excavating the rear porch, so that does not factor into. I mean, even if we did, it wouldn't really alter the lot coverage variance because we already have a roof over top of the back porch. But other than that, it's a pretty standard basement. Next slide, please. The tandem garage is illustrated here. That is the variance number 1. Again, no impact on massing and on the front of the house. Next slide, please. And you can see here the lower roof lines and then the highlighted floor plan on the 2nd floor, really illustrating that there's a step back on all sides, and then the rear covered porch is a 1-story element. Next slide, please. Here are the elevations, again illustrating that there is a step back of the 2nd floor. This house is designed more in the prairie style with shallower roofs. Next slide, please. Again here, so I'll just highlight. So the area with a deeper excavation is really more towards the middle of the rear yard, not so much affecting the side yards of the house, with the exception of the back of the garage. There's a slight step back that starts there, but other than that, it's really focused towards the middle of the back of the property. Next slide, please. We did survey. Now, this was 2 years ago when we looked at this. We haven't done an updated search since then, but at the time when this was approved initially 2 years ago, there were several very similar variances that were approved in the area. One pretty much directly opposite our proposal. The next slide, please. And then this was one of our other projects, just one street over, essentially one block over, where this house was already constructed successfully. It fits very well into the neighborhood. Again, very, very similar statistical in terms of sizes, statistics in terms of size and lot coverage. Next slide, please. And the last variance here was also our project, also in the same neighborhood, just a block away. Again, with very similar statistics. So we are confident that these that this proposal will fit very well into the context of the existing neighborhood, as evidenced by the other successful projects that we've completed in the same vicinity. Next slide, please. Oh, that's it. So that concludes my presentation. I can quickly address the comments received if now is the right time, or should we take questions first?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so we did receive comments on Tuesday, I believe yesterday, from one of the neighbors. Thank you very much for those comments. The main concerns are the side yards. Essentially, they're noting that this house will be very close to their property line, 1.2 meters, and they're concerned about excavation and impact on their property, their side of the property, which you know, not to undermine their house and their structures. So my response to that comment is that we are respecting the setbacks. We're not asking for any encroachments or reductions. We're building as of right in terms of the setbacks. And as I pointed out in the presentation, the deeper area of excavation is really focused towards the back of the property, in the middle of the lot, not so much on the sides. So we, of course, will be submitting for demolition permit. We'll be submitting for building permit. There will be a development engineering review, which will review grading and drainage. We will be preparing a drawing showing slope stability and excavation depths and all that kind of stuff to ensure that excavation is done safely. So we will be complying with all those standard, you know, checks and balances that are in place for any development in Oakville. And the other comment, I'm trying to remember what the other comment was. I think it was regarding drainage. Yeah, I think it was drainage on the adjacent property. So again, same as my last comment, is that we will have a proper engineered site plan prepared for this application. It will be reviewed by engineering development. Permit will be sought and issued, and we will take all necessary precautions not to affect negatively any adjacent properties, as we always do. I hope that addresses some of those concerns from the neighbors. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. I'll have
Any
to take questions.
from Mr. Kobasenko? See none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls.
Okay, very well. We'll take the matter into committee then. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based upon my review of the owner's application, site plan, building elevation, my site visit, together with the presentation by the owner's consultant and the planning staff's report, plus with regard to the objection the adjacent owner. However, I'm satisfied that variances are minor in nature, conform to the four tests of the Planning Act. I put forth a motion that the application applied for be approved, subject to the condition that that the proposed dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan drawings and elevation drawings dated 2/17/22, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision. The building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Dickey. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Have a good night.
We have minutes to confirm for February the 5th. I was not here, so go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Talowski. And a motion to adjourn. Mr. Hardcastle, thank you. We are adjourned at 8:45 p.m.